This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, possums, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 45 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions.
So please relax and get yourself something to eat and drink, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me for our discussion about the language that we use when we talk about serious illness, such as battling or beating the disease. In the first half, Charlie has an essay about waging the war on cancer and our recipe of the week. In the second half, I'm going to talk about how we as a society and we as individuals talk about serious illness. If we battle cancer, then by definition, there are winners and losers in a war. So why is it a battle? I mean, we really don't want anybody to lose. And in the third half, David joins us to talk about his 1-year anniversary of his meditation practice and what he has learned. So Charlie, how are you?
I'm tired. I'm sleepy. I want to go back to sleep. How are you?
That's our grumpy Charlie. I'm great.
All right, so
I'm living the dream.
Okay. So, if we are going to be in a war,
there is no diddly-dallying today. Charlie wants to go to bed. I'm sorry, you were saying?
I lost my place. Here we are. So, as Marianne said, if we are going to be in a war, we might as well have a recipe from the Civil War, he says, not ironically. At the time, the 1860s, they were called ginger nut cookies, but we now call them ginger snaps. William Alcott, the very health-conscious father
that was a great transition.
Thank you very much. William Alcott, the very health-conscious father of Louisa May Alcott, considered ginger nuts to be one of the least objectionable pastries. Author Herman Melville was quoted as saying, "He lives then on ginger nuts, thought I. Never eats a dinner, properly speaking. He must be a vegetarian then. But no, he never eats even vegetables. He eats nothing but ginger nuts. My mind then ran on in reveries concerning the probable effects upon the human constitution of living entirely on ginger nuts." I'm going to assume that sentence didn't make it into Moby Dick. These cookies are moist, not hard, and kept for a long time. We really don't have to overthink it. Just know they would be a hit at any funeral lunch you attend. So, related to our topic this week, which is not the Civil War, here is an excerpt from an essay by Jenny Jardin titled, "Why Cancer is Not a War, Fight, or Battle." I'm a cancer survivor, and since the day of my own diagnosis, it felt strange to hear, "You'll beat this. You got this. You'll win this battle. Cancer isn't as tough as you. You have a positive attitude and you're a fighter, so I know you'll get well soon. You'll be fine." Strangers and friends who loved me said some of these things. I knew they meant well. Like them, I grew up hearing cancer described as combat, something you beat if you've got enough fight in you. President Richard Nixon declared war on cancer when I was a baby. Military metaphors were familiar, but they stopped making sense when the war was me, my own body. Cancer, I soon learned, is my own cells going rogue. Suddenly, all the combat language was confusing. Am I the invading army or the battleground? Am I the soldier or a hostage the soldier is trying to liberate? All of the above? If the chemotherapy and radiation and surgery and drugs don't work and I die, Will people be disappointed in me for not fighting hard enough? For me, cancer never felt like a war. Cancer wasn't something I had, but a process my body was going through. Brutal but effective medical treatment paused that process, as far as I know today. By the grace of science and God, I'm alive with no evidence of active disease as I share these words. It's as close to cured or winning as I get, one day at a time, and I'll take it with gratitude. In war, we are taught there are winners and losers. When breast cancer, a disease for which there is no known cure, progresses to our lymph nodes and shuts down our organs, have we as fighters failed? There's no one right thing to say when someone gets diagnosed with cancer. Even if there were, nobody elected me to be the cancer vocabulary police. I am no warrior. I just showed up to my medical appointments, did what I was told, and lived as best I could. Now I try to avoid saying things to other cancer patients that imply I expect a certain outcome for them, or that I expect them to feel or behave in a particular way. Try to think positive isn't always reasonable or possible, and I don't want to make a fellow patient feel bad by commanding them to feel one thing or another. Some of the fellow cancer patients I met online became close friends during the isolation of treatment. They freely shared invaluable tips from their own cancer experience that helped me have a good outcome. Some of these men and women didn't live. Their cancer didn't respond to treatment, or they did but later popped up as metastatic recurrences. Some of those stage 4 patient friends have since died. They taught me that acceptance of the unknowable and doing our best with our bodies, our lives, and our treatment options a day at a time is the best any of us can do. One of those beautiful friends was Lisa Adams, a mother and writer and a fearless soul. When I die, don't say, I fought a battle, or lost a battle, or succumbed, she wrote. Don't make it sound like I didn't try hard enough, or have the right attitude, or that I simply gave up. When I die, tell the world what happened, plain and simple. No euphemisms, no flowery language, no metaphors. She lived, she died. She is still loved. Her words still resonate for me. During this odd era in which facts, truth, and reality itself seem to be up for grabs, I'd like to propose that with cancer, as Lisa suggested, we just call it what it is. War is war. Cancer is cancer. Cancer is a disease of cellular biology in which some cells stop obeying the good instructions they've been given. They hog the body's shared resources and replicate over and over again until the body's own organs cannot carry out the basic functions we need for life to continue. We don't know how any cancer patient's life will unfold. What will become of any one of us is not ours to know. All that any of us can do is try to live today as best we can.
Isn't that an incredible essay?
Yeah, and I don't think about it much. It's silly of me not to. But she's right. I've heard it. Oh, you can beat this. Oh, you're tough. You'll get past this. No, you always don't. And saying things like that, I don't know. I guess it's just the person saying things like that. I don't know, maybe because they don't know what to say.
It could, but,
Yeah.
we're going to offer some other things to say, right?
Oh, yeah.
To get away from that war metaphor.
That's why we're here. Yes.
Yes.
So please go to our webpage for this week's recipe and additional resources for this program. Your tax-deductible donations are always welcome so that we can continue to offer you quality programming. Thank you in advance for making your donation at www.everyonedies.org. That's dies.org. Marianne?
Thank you for that really good essay, Charlie. As a nurse practitioner, I've worked for many years with people who were living with cancer. Not fighting cancer, not battling cancer, but living with cancer. These people, along with their family and friends, would often use the language of the fight against cancer. But this metaphor never really made sense to me. What are we fighting against? And how do you fight against a random disease? So using a statistical model that measured the proportion of cancer risk across many tissue types, scientists from Johns Hopkins Kimmel Cancer Center published a study in 2015, which concluded that 2/3 of the variation of adult cancer risk across tissues can be explained primarily by bad luck. In other words, a major contributing factor to cancer is beyond our control. Some people may feel relief in this research finding. Cancer has a long history of stigmatization. Patients and family members frequently blame themselves, believing that there was something they could have done to prevent their or their family member's cancer. These findings may bring comfort and maybe even lift the burden of guilt on those who have endured the physical and emotional consequences of cancer. I'd like to propose that serious illness, including cancer, be moved to the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, which is an area from which warring parties agree to remove their military forces. Serious illnesses are diseases and not a military campaign. Surviving is not an act of will. If it were, much fewer people would ever die. Friends and family mean well when they tell us to stay positive, be courageous, and you can beat this. I've even heard oncologists say that the patient failed the chemotherapy treatment. Really? Did they just put themselves through what can feel like hell, going round upon round of chemotherapy, and then deliberately failing to respond to the drug? Do we set out to disappoint our oncologist by refusing to eradicate the cancer cells? I don't think so. Do those for whom the chemotherapy has been effective and declared NED, which means no evidence of disease, fight harder than those whose cancer did not respond to the chemotherapy? Yet family and friends will tell everyone that their loved one has won the fight against the disease. And if they die from the disease, our language is that they have lost the fight. When we frame serious illness as a war, there will be winners and losers. What is the value of this characterization? Why should we participate when some of us are going to be called losers? The use of the battle metaphor implies a level of control patients simply do not have. For the most part, we don't know why one person is alive 10 years after a diagnosis of advanced cancer and another one dies within months. Maureen Kenny, in her log about having breast cancer, writes, "It seems if you've got cancer, you're almost always seen as battling or fighting it, more often than not, bravely. We never hear of anyone dying of the disease after a lackluster, take it or leave it, weak-willed tussle. Can't we be allowed to just have cancer and get on with it? It seems that we either die fighting the good fight or be the one who chooses to withdraw treatment before the end by giving up and giving in. This type of victim blaming seems to only apply in the case of cancer and not to other serious illnesses. If we die from complications of heart disease, do we lose our battle with heart disease? Unfortunately, the continuous urge to win the battle extends to oncologists who actively treat patients for too long. Fact is that 8% of patients receive chemotherapy within 2 weeks of dying of cancer, and 62% within 2 months. For my own sister, we took her to chemotherapy on Friday, and she died on Monday. You have to wonder about those kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
Late chemotherapy is associated with decreased use of hospice, greater use of emergency interventions, including resuscitation, an increased risk of dying in an intensive care unit rather than at home, which reflects the need to battle until the end. Most cancer treatments are toxic. They can cause depression of the immune system, fatigue, rash, nausea, vomiting, bankruptcy, nerve pain, and that's just to name a few. Yet we're willing to deal with these side effects as a trade-off for hope. And how honest are the oncologists about the true potential benefit of the treatment? Ellis wrote in the JAMA article that for many therapies, there's little evidence that life is substantially prolonged. And for argument's sake, let us define substantial as 2 months or longer. We've seen patients who are determined to win their battle. As they turn from treatment to treatment, they're not spending time with loved ones. Rather, they are chasing the elusive win, a path that affects not only them, but also their family and caregivers, as well as family finances. You know, Charlie, we talk each week about how everyone dies. In many of my conversations with people who are diagnosed with a serious illness, like cancer, they tell me they're going to beat cancer. You know, rather than let that go, I sit down and talk to them about what that means to them. What I found is that once a cancer diagnosis is made, all other possible ways of dying become irrelevant. Because if you beat cancer, our inherent mortality is no longer relevant. I mean, apparently. Unfortunately, cancer or not, something will cause our death. We may have a car accident, be gored by a lion, or bit by an assassin bug. We don't control the cause or the timing of our deaths. Stuart Scott from ESPN died of cancer at the age of 49, 7 years after his initial diagnosis and aggressive therapy. At the ESPY Awards during his cancer treatment, he told the audience, "When you die, it does not mean that you lose to cancer. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and in the manner in which you live. Live every day like it was your last one, and one day you're going to be right. Live well, enjoy, and mindfulness of the life you have. Stop fighting a war that we cannot win." Any questions about that, Charlie?
No, but to your point, you know, and you and I have discussed this, where people say, "Oh, yes, you know, so and so passed, you know, last week," or "so and so is no longer with us." And I always, you know, politely say, "Oh, you mean she died?" And yeah, and sometimes with, I mean, because that's it. I mean, language, you have to be aware of the language that you use. People die. People are born and people die. And to your point, what you've been saying about how people react to cancer and the wording they use, it's not helpful. That's it. It's like what this guy from ESPN said. It's, you know, it's how you live your life. I mean, we're all going to die someday. You know, my time might just come quicker than yours, but that's the reality. It's not mean or cold or heartless. It's the reality. Yeah, you might get gored. You might trip. You might trip on a curb, land on your head, and that's it. You're dead.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go in a really stupid way that people will sit around and say, "Do you believe she did that? What a klutz." You know? Yeah. I figure it'll be an embarrassing reason.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So I'll just keep doing embarrassing things, I guess.
No, it's not embarrassing. Just the way people...
you haven't seen me fall in the middle of the street or whatever. Trip on a curb.
Oh, dear. Okay.
So, for our third half, let's welcome David to the microphone.
Hello, everyone. I've been practicing mindful meditation for a little over a year now, so I thought it might be useful to share my experience with you. A little background about me. I have not been a person who ever thought that meditation was for me. I like action, and I thought of meditation as a waste of time. The closest I ever came to meditation has been my career in distance running. That always worked for me. When COVID happened, I continued to run but something seemed off. I felt grouchy and out of sorts, while I usually am pretty even-keeled. I thought I needed to explore other options to become more resilient, and that's when I started mindful meditation. And started on what is for me a journey. My experience started with 10 minutes a day, usually in the morning, and I started a free mindfulness app called Mindfulness, produced by the Veterans Administration. It worked well for about 6 months, and then I felt I needed more guidance. So I searched for alternatives, and I found Headspace. There are several other similar apps, but Headspace was economical, with subscriptions about $70 a year, and offered many more useful resources. I went through the basic and pro courses and found them to be useful, but I decided to repeat the pro courses, and I found that I'd missed a lot of guidance that they provided the first time around. I still use the VA app occasionally, but I use Headspace as my main resource. Over the course of the year, I progressed from 10 minutes to now about 30 minutes. So what I get out of all this? I very quickly saw some improvement in my blood pressure. In fact, my blood pressure is lower today than it's been since my 30s. I'm now 69 and counting, by the way. That's good, but not what mindfulness was really all about. Mindfulness helps one be more present in the current moment and enjoy more of the time we do have, because everyone dies. You might have heard that somewhere.
Catchy title.
Yeah. Many times our minds tell us stories that just aren't true, so mindfulness meditation is intended to help us be more present moment to moment. As I began, and for many months, I was frustrated because I found it difficult to sit in silence without my mind continually wandering. I continue to experience the wandering mind today, and I realize that training the mind to do so is a task that takes some time. I found a couple of things that helped me. First, I began to recognize that mindfulness is a journey, and I shouldn't expect to master it in 6 months or 6 years. Secondly, I began to view mindfulness to train the mind over time and thus be more present day to day. I think of meditation as if I were training a puppy. Initially, that puppy doesn't know how to control itself, but with steady, firm, and gentle training, the puppy learns how to behave. When my mind starts to wander, I just note that what I was thinking, and I return to the breath. So like training a puppy, I'm training my mind to learn to sit in silence during my practice, and from practice I learn to be more aware throughout the day. I find myself paying attention to small things throughout the day and enjoying my life more. I also seem to be more empathetic than I've ever been. The other day I was sitting in traffic and suddenly was rear-ended by another truck. In the past, my response would have been surprise and anger. But this day, after the initial surprise, I was worried about everyone in the other vehicle was all right. In fact, the driver and an infant that was in the back seat were both fine. So when things happen, I'm aware that my responses are beginning to change. Hopefully, I'll become better at responding to situations and be more present for my friends and loved ones. I still find myself responding with irritation and becoming the grumpy old man on occasion. I am 69, by the way, after all. And when that happens, I can look back and put my responses into perspective and hopefully learn not to get caught up in the story that really isn't true. I find that often I'm the victim of not listening carefully and not being present for people around me. If you don't believe me, ask Marianne. So I recommend mindfulness meditation to appreciate your life more. Also, it's a way to enjoy people in your life and bring them enjoyment by being present for them. If you decide to give it a try, do expect some benefits, but remember that it takes a long-term commitment to realize all that mindfulness has to offer. Be patient with yourself. Find a support system that works for you. For me, so far, a couple of easily accessed apps have worked well. That may change over time, but for now, it meets my needs. I'll provide some resources which which I have explored in addition to the ones I've mentioned in the show notes. Charlie, any questions? Have you tried meditation at all?
Not the way you're describing. No, that's not true. I did, and it just really, I mean, for me, it didn't do anything for me. But what started to happen a little before COVID hit and everything locked down, unconsciously, I was just spending more time doing what I liked, just wandering around the museum for an entire afternoon. I enjoy architecture, so living in New York, especially older architecture. So living in New York, there are lots of neighborhoods that have that are older. And it was just that I was lost track of time because I was really just in the moment, if you will. I mean, without thinking, oh, I have to be doing something else, or I'm wasting time doing this. I could do something more constructive. And it began to dawn on me, this is constructive. I'm doing something for myself. Yeah. And I know,
Well, that's kind of what it's all about, is experiencing more of those moments in your life. Not just occasionally, but every day.
Yeah, exactly. So, and even with something, I do a lot of, editing. And nowadays I rarely find it tedious. It's, for me, editing is creativity. So yeah, to your point, it's not a chore anymore.
Good.
Yeah. So
Good.
just that, just like that thing about living in the moment. Yes. So good for you. That's great that you're doing that. Yeah.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. And that's it for this week's episode. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from manga artist Gosho Ayoma, fear of death is worse than death itself.
And I'm David Gillette, and we will see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.